question, of course, as you mentioned at the beginning. Adversity can strengthen the ego, or it can gradually, or in some cases suddenly, dissolve the ego, or at least diminish it. So it can go either way. And I must agree with you. I don't know whether you literally said it. Perhaps still in the majority of cases, it strengthens the ego, because people don't know the opportunity that every adversity represents. So why does it happen? How does it strengthen the ego? You can see it sometimes with people who are sick, or people who are disabled. Let's say I've met disabled people with physical disabilities, for example, and in some cases they are really angry with the world and bitter because look at what happened to me. They say, why do I can't move anymore? I've been afflicted with this. What have I done to deserve this? And these are questions that are the justifiable questions. The question, what have I done to deserve? Why has the world, or whatever they say, God, the world, the universe, or whoever, they've done this to me? Why? And then they become bitter and angry, and the ego becomes more and more rigid and hardened, and so that is one way it could go. And then I have met people with disabilities who, through their disability, at some point, whether through a spiritual teaching, and in some cases never come into contact with any spiritual teaching, it just happened that at some moment they realized intuitively that all the suffering was generated through resistance. And then the resistance to the isness of their life, this moment, they were able to let go, because perhaps the suffering was getting too much. Something happened, something clicked inside. Or even if it didn't happen completely, they were able to have moments of inner peace. An inner peace that is not caused by an external condition, an inner peace that seems to be in contradiction to an external condition. So that they would say, how could a person who is suffering this feel so peaceful? And so also that applies to people who are approaching the end of their lifespan because they have some illness and they have been to the doctor, and the doctor says you have 6 months or 1 year, and suddenly something in them opens up, and all that remains is that the person already dies. There's no more future, and all that remains is the present moment and the aware space. So I've had the privilege of working with, when I was still seeing individuals, with 2 or 3 people to whom that happened. And they became luminous beings in the last few weeks or months of their lives, and became just, I couldn't see that there was any person left. There was only a space of conscious presence left. Just wonderful, as if they had just come into this world. So they came, and then they came to me, and then still asking questions, very profound questions, wanting to understand what happened, and it's beautiful. So this can happen. It can happen collectively to people who go through warfare and in countries, or become refugees. They lose everything. And again, it can go either way. Whenever there's any great loss in your life, that again, an opportunity opens up. If you resist, and you resist, the resistance origin. The origin of the resistance is a narrative that forms in your mind. that says something about the situation and about your life and about other people. So the narrative forms in your mind, and the narrative is an unhappy one. And then there's continuous resistance and non-alignment with the isness of the present moment. Now, one could ask, well, how could somebody who's lost their home, perhaps even lost loved ones, and then they don't know where to go, how could this person be in a state of alignment with the present moment? Isn't that, how can somebody accept the unacceptable, accept that which in conventional terms would be regarded as unacceptable? How is that possible? But that's precisely it. If you can accept the unacceptable, that is the opening, and then you realize the unacceptable is actually not unacceptable, it is acceptable. And I was homeless for a certain period in my life with not knowing what to live on the next day or the next week. And I had already gone into the state of acceptance, so it was a very pleasant experience, but potentially would have been extremely unpleasant. So not having a home was for me already something that was not experienced as something bad. But I knew I had to take some action eventually to get a home. And so gradually something happened. I don't want to talk too much about that. I also mentioned in the New Earth, I believe, when I was at university, there was the Stephen Hawkins, the physicist who was confined to a wheelchair, who passed away a couple of years ago, whenever it was. He wasn't famous at that time, only famous locally in the university. We would always be in the same dining room having lunch, but not the same table. I never met him, wasn't introduced, but observed him many times sitting at a neighboring table. The one moment when I held open the door for him, he was coming through in his wheelchair, and I looked into his eyes and I could see there was no unhappiness. In particular situations, you may lose awareness and regress to total identification with some reactive pattern. And it could be the pain body. A hugely problematic area for many or most people is relationships of whatever kind or on whatever level. It's where people seek their happiness, and it's where many people find their unhappiness. And so I'm talking about both intimate relationships, somebody you live with, and I'm talking about other kinds of relationship also at work, other family members, relatives, friends, and even very brief relationships, because any interaction with another human being I'm using now relationship in a wider sense, any interaction with another human being is a relationship. You are relating to that person. And so it is, for many people, most of their, or a large part of their suffering or unhappiness, unfortunately, is derived from relationships. They tend to go wrong so often or present so many problems and obstacles. And it seems that human beings are just so terribly difficult, except one, the one who is listening to these words. You remember the statement, know thyself, famous words of wisdom. Knowing yourself, there are two levels to knowing yourself. One is the level of mental, emotional, and reactive patterns that you display in your life, and the ability to be aware of them. That is one level of self-knowledge, of knowing yourself. That is the kind of thing that sometimes in good therapy sessions, if you have a good, aware therapist, can be helpful to become aware of that level in yourself so that you know what your predominant patterns are. Doesn't everybody know what their patterns? No. They are so identified with their patterns that there's no awareness left. And that usually means when a person is so unconscious, that unconscious, the definition of unconscious, the way we use it here in a spiritual sense, not in a clinical sense, I'm not talking about unconscious, but in a spiritual sense, unconscious is to be totally identified with thoughts and emotions. So there's no room for any awareness left. So you are in the grip of the thought, in the grip of the emotion, and often thoughts and emotions are linked, go together. They have you in their grip so that they basically, you are them, you are the emotion. And those people who are so unconscious, there are still millions around, you might have noticed. Often they have a tendency of seeking always always the people are always to be blamed out there. There's always people, they point their fingers at why these people are so bad and what they're doing to you or how awful they are. There's never looking at oneself. Jesus already had that statement. Why do you see what is the saying about what? Yeah, you see a little splinter in the other person's eye, but you don't see the huge splinter that is in your eye. Very profound statement. So why don't you find that first, he says. So in other words, he says, know thyself. Be aware of your own patterns. And most people here have that awareness, but perhaps not all the time. For many of you, when you are challenged in a particular way, in particular situations, you may lose awareness and regress to total identification with some reactive pattern. And it could be the pain body. As you know, the pain body is old accumulated emotion that still I regard it as an almost autonomous entity that lives in you. It's a way of looking at it, but there's a lot of truth to this. There's an emotional field that lives in you almost as an entity, one could say. That sounds slightly spooky, but one could say that even a thought is an entity. When you think a thought, it is an energy formation. It is a little being that you give birth to. So it has a life. It depends for its life. It depends on you, on your life. but it is a little entity, and so in some forms of either deep unconsciousness or when mental illness, sometimes it can happen that the mind gets completely taken over by these little thought entities. And so you're totally occupied. Your mind is totally occupied. Another word for occupied is, I won't say it, it sounds too spooky. So you're totally occupied by these thoughts, and they pretend to be you. So that is total lack of awareness. So it's essential for your spiritual growth to be continuously alert and vigilant, so that you are able to be there in the background, so to speak, as the awareness in your daily life, so that you're not completely taken over by the arising thoughts and arising emotions. When you interact with people, when you become upset about this or that, always any kind of upset or disturbance in your energy field can be very helpful. Do not believe that I shouldn't have this disturbance in my energy field, or I shouldn't be upset because I'm spiritual. I don't get upset about these things anymore. But honestly observe what arises, and then observe how does it arise. And as I already mentioned last night, very often you will find it is caused by certain thoughts in your mind, certain interpretations, certain reactions. It can also happen that a reaction comes so suddenly that it's just an emotion waiting to come up. An emotion, and this is what the pain body does, as you may know. The pain body is not necessarily always active in you. There are periods when the old emotional pain that you still carry around with you, is dormant, and then it leaves you in peace for a while, and then you are fine. You meet somebody, and this person is lovely, and it all goes fine, and you might spend some time together, and it's still fine, and then you go on vacation together for the first time. And then there comes a moment when something else comes in that's not fine, either in you or through the other. And what happens in relationships? The pain body periodically needs to feed on a certain experience that corresponds to its energy field. The vibrational frequency of its energy field is a good external image of the pain body in, I think it's in Lord of the Rings, is this little being, I can't remember the name, goes and even the little being once was a normal being, according to the legend in this. It's kind of modern mythology. That being was once a normal, lovely human, and there is still, although this being has been completely taken over by what I call the pain body. Occasionally, there are still instances when the original being that's been completely taken over still shines through, and there's a little bit of tiny glimmers of awareness come in occasionally, and then you almost feel sorry for it. But then again, the pain body, and if you feel sorry and you give in, then immediately the pain body will take advantage of that. So that's a lovely modern mythological illustration of the pain body. So to observe that in yourself, in relationships, how it periodically comes up either in your partner or in yourself, wanting some kind of drama, amplifying something little into something big, because it wants to feed on your partner's reaction. It wants the emotional negativity, it needs the emotional negativity from the other in order to suck it up. And then you give back of it to the other. The pain body, then mutually they energize each other. And that is unconscious. That is how couples, many couples, most couples perhaps, unless there's already considerable consciousness there in both of them, or at least one of them, they go through that periodically, don't realize that that is what it is. And at first there are even people who feel they need that drama to feel that the relationship is still real. And that is, there comes a point when it gets too much. So then the pain that arises so often and so frequently, it gets too much. I can't live with this person anymore. And then you separate. But if the awareness hasn't come in so that you can be aware of your own pain body, what you contribute to it, then you will repeat the same thing in the next relationship. So the pain body needs to re-experience emotional pain through drama. And whoever it comes up first in, it is usually it's always recognizable by being an overreaction to something, an event, something you said, something you did, or something you failed to say, or you failed to do. But the person who is displaying the pain body does not know it's an overreaction. So only an outside observer or the other might see that it's an overreaction. But to the pain body, it seems a totally natural reaction. So you need to know what situations, there may be certain situations in your life that tend to trigger the pain body in your relationship or at work. There may be certain people that your pain body is susceptible to, resonates with. If you live alone, then the pain body has a little problem. What am I going to feed on? I can't have drama with myself, or can I? Yes, you can. You can have the drama in your mind. You can have a stream of destructive and negative thoughts in your mind, either about yourself or others. They may not be here, but you have the thoughts about them. They may be in your past. They may be dead. But the pain body, if there's nobody around that the pain body can feed on through negative emotion, it will feed on negative thought streams, your thought streams. And this is where the addiction to negative thinking comes from.
Well, first I have to say you are so very cute.
Oh.
You answer questions.
Thank you.
And then also, as I told Kim in the morning, I so wanted you to come to China.
Oh, yes. I want to go too.
Okay, that's good.
I have been to Hong Kong done retreats in Hong Kong, but not for some years. Mainland China, do you think they would be okay with me?
Of course.
I mean the government.
Well, the government, it should be okay.
Yeah.
You haven't done anything terribly wrong there before, right?
No.
So it should be okay.
Okay.
Because you're already so very popular in China.
Yeah.
Your books are very widely read.
Yeah.
And so many of my friends in the spiritual community, or even outside of this community, everybody just tells me how much they are expecting your visit.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you. I will come.
Oh, that's great. Oh, here finally comes my question.
Yeah.
Okay, so how can we truly accept and surrender and be present without having to go through a lot of sufferings or intense sufferings to the point that you have no other choice but to give up your ego?
Right.
And for instance, when I hear certain statements like, you must not reject your rejection, or you must not judge your judgments, well, that made me feel even more painful, because that's exactly what I'm doing. So sometimes, most of the times, I am aware that I'm judging this or that, but how to proceed further to really accept, but not just accepting in my mind.
Ah, yes. Now, as you mentioned, it is true that for some people are forced into surrender because they cannot stand the suffering anymore. And sometimes life does that to you, to a person. So the suffering becomes so intense that was the case with me. Suffering became so intense, I couldn't stand it anymore. I couldn't stand myself anymore. On some level, there must have been a realization that I was generating the suffering. I didn't really consciously know that, but I could not live with myself anymore, as that was the phrase that came into my head before I disidentified from the egoic self, the mind-made, unhappy me. And then there are those people who are sufficiently conscious, like all of you here, yet they are sufficiently conscious to be able to surrender or accept voluntarily without being forced into it by life. So it's a voluntary decision to come to an acceptance of what arises in this moment. But the acceptance needs to be deep enough so that it's not just on a conceptual level, but also on a deeper level, so the emotional level, for example. Otherwise you would be lying to yourself when you say, let's say you are in a situation that generates an irritation in you. Let's say a relatively small situation. There's a long delay somewhere, you're waiting for something, there's a long delay. You can find irritation beginning to build up. At some point you realize that irritation is beginning to build up. Then your mind says, I need to surrender, I should surrender to this situation. I need to accept it the way it is, okay. And then the mind says, okay, I accept this situation the way it is. The question is, does it remain a statement in the mind? Because the true acceptance needs to go into every cell of your body. You need to be in touch. This is why, as a practice, body awareness is very helpful when you're not being challenged, just to feel the inner body, so that habitually you're able to place attention into the inner energy field of your body, which also helps you to know what's going on in the emotional field of your body. So, let's say you're irritated at the airport, the flight is cancelled, now you're lining up, hypothetical situation of many situations like that happen all the time. Your flight is cancelled, now you're lining up again to get on another flight, but there's 20 people ahead of you. here in China, they're often, the airline industry is not very long waiting periods, and people get very upset at airports because they have to wait a long time, and they suddenly start shouting, "Can't take anymore." So I accept this moment as it is, and then you need to detect within yourself whether you have really accepted it, because are you still feeling irritated or not? To be able to know if you're irritated or not, you need to know both whether your mind is continuing to produce thoughts of irritation, and maybe it is not because you have mentally decided you're not going to have any more. But in the emotional field, you may still be angry and irritated. So your attention needs to move into the body so that you're aware, is there still irritation in here, while my mind is saying, I completely accept this moment. Or you could say, another example of that would be, I forgive you, I forgive you. But there's something in you that hasn't forgiven, so you have forgiven on a superficial mental level. So you need to get your attention in there to actually feel what is not only what your mind is saying at this moment, what does it feel like to be in this moment? What is the feeling of it? And that will tell you, when you ask yourself, what's the feeling of this moment, that directs your attention into the body. And then you'll notice whether there's still, or whether there's a contraction still. And if there is, you can notice it. You say, oh, there's still irritation there. And then what you can do, for example, is accept whatever you feel. Acceptance, surprisingly, changes it most. It's the greatest agent for change, accepting whatever you feel. Because whatever you feel is non-acceptance, so you bring acceptance into the non-acceptance, which is in the contraction, or the vibrational frequency of anger or irritation. You said, oh, it's okay to feel that. And sometimes it's possible to just drop it too. Sometimes it's saying, I don't really want that. So you take 1 or 2 deep breaths and release it from the body. And then you have released it both mentally, because the irritation usually starts in the mind making judgments about the situation you find yourself in. The body then reacts to the judgment and creates an emotion that reflects the mental judgment. So it's always good to start with the mind and realizing, I am not irritated because of this situation, I'm irritated because what your mind is commenting on this situation. That's an enormous insight. And that applies to so many instances in your life when you feel any kind of unhappiness seemingly being caused by the situation you find yourself in, by people, circumstances, and so on, seemingly caused, but 95% of the unhappiness, to use a generic term, in whatever form it arises, and 95% of the unhappiness is generated, surprisingly, by your mind. What your mind is saying about the situations that you find yourself in. Once you realize that, you realize that you can be free of that, because you don't have to do it. It's the egoic mind, the unconsciousness, the unobserved mind is generating it. So that's the first, there you stop. Then you look at the emotion. Then also you have enough consciousness left when it's not continuously absorbed by agitated thought processes. Then you have enough consciousness left to direct it into the body and examine what it is that you feel. So the 2 levels. So let me know how it goes next time you're at an airport in China, for example. Or what city do you live in?
Shanghai.
Oh yeah. Well, that's where it's all happening. It must be a very dynamic place, I imagine. And high energy, everybody's active and doing things. And that's a wonderful place to practice presence. It's ideal. And of course you're challenged all the time, But Shanghai needs you and people like you who bring consciousness there.
To bring you there.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
This mind-made sense of self is also much more focused on the negative than the positive. To be free, you awaken to who you are beyond your history and your life situation.
I take care of patients from surgery, chemotherapy, hospice, end of life. And there's that same pressure on all aspects not to spend the time and take care of them maybe the way that we would like to if we could. So I'm doing this to help take care of me, which is great. But my question is related to all the other physicians that I work with who are suffering. And I can see it in them, and it's the more that I learn your teachings, the more I see the suffering in them, and I don't know what to do to help them.
Right. I think I saw your question. I had selected it to answer it. If it was a written question, that might have been yours. That was good, so I'm glad you were chosen.
Thank you.
Have you made any attempt to somehow convey this to your colleagues, maybe unsuccessful attempts so far?
To some degree. Just over the last couple of years, there's been real research showing, burnout, and that's a definable thing. And so we can use the term burnout, which doesn't seem to offend people, to talk about it.
Yeah.
And then I've introduced some mindfulness strategies because that's another term that doesn't seem to offend people.
I was just going to say that mindfulness has become almost acceptable. So you can, if you use that word, that might be more acceptable than presence. It's the same thing, of course, but I don't use mindfulness because it implies that your mind is full, but that's okay. So what about creating a support group for people who work in similar capacities, both people that you know personally and perhaps other people? Because nowadays, the strange thing is, the wonderful thing about the technology that we have nowadays, not only it amplifies human madness, because any person can put out any thought and immediately, no matter how crazy it is, there will be a few thousand people in the world who will respond to it and agree with you and participate in the craziness. But on the other hand, there's also, you can reach so many people through the media, those things, internet and so on. But you would start on a small scale. What about a mindfulness group for physicians? You could call it that. You can become the leader of that. Because...
Okay.
Sometimes life asks you to do something. It may ask you to do something before you may think you're ready for it, but life knows better. And the strange thing is, you as a person would never really feel ready for this, because it's hard to do. But if you can become still and get out of the way, because becoming still means getting out of the way, if you can become still, you'll be amazed, and I'm not only talking to you, but many others, you'll be amazed how empowered suddenly the words that you speak become, or the energy that flows through you, and how inspired you become, and what it might lead to. Because things need to change if the system, not only in medicine but in many other areas, is ripe for either collapse or complete change. It cannot go on the way it's going, because it can only become more disintegrating, and no matter where you look, it's a question of it'll either collapse or change. And if it collapses, that's fine too. Now I'm talking about social systems and so on in general. Eventually something more conscious will arise, or something more conscious may arise and transform the old before it collapses completely. So what is it that you could, the ideas will come to you, you can just offer to them, for example, have a meditation, show them what mindfulness is, see if they like it, and then go on from there, and then transmit it, go on the internet, contact others. It may suddenly spread. There are people in mainstream who are doing this. I got invited by a scientist to Stanford University a couple of years ago. I gave a talk there, and you would have thought they would not be interested in what I have to say, but that I was wrong. They were very interested. No, not everybody came, but many people did come. And this is a scientist who, actually I believe he's a neurosurgeon, and he teaches at Stanford. He is extremely interested in mindfulness and spreading the message. He's connected also to Buddhism and Buddhist teachings. So maybe you can talk to him and see what feedback you get from him. It's good if you can, I don't know if you've met other physicians here, if you can build up a support network of people who can then support others. There are infinite possibilities, but anybody who is here would have to consider themselves as a leader in this, because you may not yet be fully present all the time and fully enlightened on a daily basis, but you know much more than most. I mean, and I don't mean conceptual knowledge. There's a knowing in you of that dimension of consciousness that is still news to many. And I believe that the world desperately needs you. And you start in your world. You can reach the most appropriate place for you to reach others is within your sphere of influence, and that is your work. So what form that will take, only you can know. It will be helpful to connect with others, get feedback, talk about it, what can we do? And then the person at Stanford, I believe, is Professor James Doty. Unfortunately, I don't know how to spell it. Doty, something like that. I can let you know. So see yourself as spearheading this movement of awakening, because they need you. So not only your patients need you, your colleagues need you, and then the work that you do, which is wonderful, will be enhanced immeasurably by bringing a different state of consciousness to it. And once that happens, then the entire system may begin to undergo a change. Change always begins within. How do you feel about this?
I'm a little speechless. But it's a crisis, and I think that it really is a crisis. And so, if I know you're speaking not just to me but to others that are here, and I think that we need to do this in all aspects of medicine. So, if I can help.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
So thank you for giving me the push.
Thank you. I know that Dr. Patel and his wife is here. He's been coming for many years. And have you met him? I believe he has in his cancer clinic in Bakersfield, he introduces also counseling and mindfulness. Maybe you can connect with him.
Great.
Thank you. Good. Thank you. This mind-made sense of self is also much more focused on the negative than the positive. To be free, you awaken to who you are beyond your history and your life situation. There's a very strong pattern in me that doesn't want to live anymore, and that is really hard to deal with. Can you please advise me? Well, first you need to observe whether there's negativity in there. It is like, I can't take any more of this, or whatever thought comes up when you feel that you don't want to live anymore, can't take it anymore, I've had enough. In other words, is it a resistance pattern that's still egoic? Because things are not going the way you wanted them to go? Or there may be a kind of tiredness of life, sense-perceived existence, situations, and so on. A weariness, perhaps. You are not here, so I cannot ask you to explain exactly what it is that you feel and how you experience that not wanting to live anymore. But anybody, no matter what it is, I suggest that you practice dying. By surrendering completely to the present moment. Don't demand that this moment should be different. It is the way it is. Then the ego dies. Instead of committing suicide, I highly recommend surrender. Much more effective. Die before you die. Do situations still have the power to induce in you negativity? Do situations still have the power to make you unhappy? Events, situations, people. Is that why you want to not live anymore? That's not surrender. Try surrender and see what happens. Which means no complaint about anything anymore. Mental. Complete acceptance of this moment as it is. And even the thought, I don't want this anymore, whatever, is a resistance to what is. You don't need it. So if you feel the pull of death, die now to the mind-made self, the ego. Allow the ego to die. Complete surrender to what is. And see what happens. You may suddenly find the peace that passes all understanding. It means you've died. The ego is dissolved. When it comes to conscious manifestation, my interest at this point is not in manifesting anything for myself personally, but in wanting to help manifest a world that is more peaceful and just for everyone. Can how you teach conscious manifestation help with that? Good question. Relevant. Manifesting a world that is more just, I think that was the word, more peaceful and just for everyone. Well, that would be it's a good aim. Now, ultimately, of course, what you experience as the world is intrinsically one with your consciousness. The only place where you experience the world is in your consciousness. Philosophers have even questioned whether there actually is a world out there independent of conscious perception. We don't need to go there, but there's no doubt that the entire world happens inside you, one could say. You don't know what you see, what the eyes transmit, the senses transmit becomes nerve impulses that are sent to the brain, and that's just on the physical level. And then these nerve impulses are decoded, and then some kind of word appears within you. But to what extent that corresponds to a world out there, we don't even know. So to change the world, so you look at the world in some way, you could almost say, go as far as to say, what you're actually looking at is a reflection in the external, in the world of form, of your state of consciousness, I could say. It's an interesting way to look at it. And the state of consciousness is partly there is your personal world and there is the collective world. So the two, they are connected, but they're not the same, because first of all, there is what you experience as a world in your personal life, or the people you habitually interact with, where you live, your surroundings. It starts with simple things like even the objects that surround you habitually where you live. So your world is your personal, your relationships with humans that you live with, your relationships with other humans that you meet every day casually, or where you work, the people you work with. So all these things, your personal life, so-called life, is one sphere that you move in. And the important thing is not to neglect that in search of a better collective world. The two are related, but to disregard, this is a mistake that is often made, to disregard your personal sphere, the world that is immediately accessible to you as you and your life, the people in your life, where you live, all that, your work. To neglect that, it's very seductive to think there's so much wrong with the world out there, the collective. That's really what I should be concerned with, because there's so much wrong out there, you can see it. You just have to turn on some kind of device, whether it's television or that brings you the news and the commentaries, continuous stream. And then, of course, that is the collective world that then enters your living room or wherever you are, and then they get mixed up. They can obliterate, the collective can obliterate your personal life, and you think your personal life is quite irrelevant now, because what really matters, the world needs to change. It's so dreadful. Well, yes, the world needs to change, and the world is changing because humanity is a work in progress. Humanity is slowly evolving in fits and starts and regressive periods. It takes a few steps forward and then a few steps, 4 steps forward, 3 steps back, then a few more forward. There's a gradual evolution of humanity, and to focus only on what is going wrong within that process, that evolutionary process, is also very misleading, because that's what you see when you watch the media and so on. It focuses not on what's going right or what has gone right, it focuses on what's going wrong. Then you give that more and more attention. By giving attention to something, you amplify it. So whatever you give it, now I'm not saying to completely ignore the world, no, but to give it an excessive amount of attention and only continuously think about what's wrong with the world, then you forget what's right with the world, and that then diminishes. So we have the external world coming into your living room, for example, through the media. And it can be, as I said, you can sometimes believe that your personal world, your immediate sphere of influence is irrelevant, but that's not the case. So the starting point with changing the world is to become aware of how you operate in this world. The starting point is, how do you relate to the humans in your life? How do you, what is your mind? What is your mind doing? What is your predominant state of consciousness? What are your predominant emotions? What are the predominant thoughts that go through your mind? It's vitally important to become aware of that. If you're not aware of what the predominant emotions are, that the predominant thoughts are, plus accompanying emotions that go through your mind, you are unaware. And the emotions, the thoughts and emotions that arise continuously within you are a form of conditioning, and so they take possession of you. So it's vitally important, as the starting point for changing the world is to become aware of your world.
Perhaps this has become the teaching. So the understanding of what happened to me gradually became the teaching, and I realize it's not complicated at all, and I realize many humans are ready for it.
You said this happened, this peacefulness, awareness happened to you spontaneously. And I wonder, why did it happen to you? And exactly how did that happen? And
okay, the first one, I don't know if I'll be able to. The first part of it, I don't know if I'll be able to answer it. It just happened. Well, I can say that it happened because the egoic sense of self got eroded, and what happened was a disidentification from thinking. This is what happened, but I didn't know that that's what happened when it first happened. It just happened. I couldn't have explained it. The last thought that I was identified with was, I can't live with myself any longer. And then I looked at the thought. Well, there was myself. Who am I? I didn't know that at the time when this thought came, who am I if I can't live with myself any longer? Who is the self and who am I? I didn't know at the time that I had voiced an ancient question that has been used in meditation for hundreds or thousands of years, the question, who am I? Its spiritual teachers in India have used that question to take people into realization since ancient times. And the question arose spontaneously in my mind, who am I? Because it seemed strange. I no longer know if the sentence, I cannot live with myself any longer, seemed so strange because there seemed to be two people there, the I and the self. And that was so strange that I was wondering, who am I if I can't live with myself? And that simple question, who am I, led to a realization of the essence of I, of what I means. And the I realized, is not my thoughts. So I disidentified from the unhappy self that was telling itself unhappy stories all the time. And so the sense of I was no longer lodged in thought. It removed itself from thought because it just couldn't stand it anymore. Simple as that. That's why it happened. It couldn't stand it anymore. It removed itself. It was too painful. And all was left was the sense of I-ness or beingness or presence, which is inherently peaceful, which has no problems in it, is timeless. And that is the true source of everybody's identity. The true source it's the beingness, the formless. And then the self that consisted of thinking, identification with thinking, couldn't survive, the sense of self that was no longer invested with the identification. So the unhappy me, as I called it later, dissolved, and was left was just the I presence. It seemed so simple, but even that I couldn't have explained at the time. It took years before I could verbalize something like this, what I'm saying now. But it is basically a very simple thing. In a way, it's a very natural thing, and it could well be that at some point in human evolution, perhaps soon, there could be a natural thing that happens to people when they reach adulthood. I would suggest that as you grow up, you're a teenager, it seems a natural stage to still be identified with the ego, to grow, identified with thinking and so on, and then you become an adult, and then to outgrow that, and then perhaps ancient cultures, as you know, had rituals and ceremonies, and in ancient Greece you had the mysteries that people underwent. They were kind of workshops, I suppose, but where transformation of consciousness happened. And so that could happen in a more enlightened culture as people reach young adulthood. They are perhaps these are the new mysteries that we can create. Mysteries was not everybody here may know what in ancient Greece was called mysteries, was a kind of initiation process. People were not supposed to talk about it, so nobody knows exactly what they did, but it was some kind of deepening of the human being. There were things going back to ancient times, to Egypt and to India. So we could have this modern mysteries where people step out of identification with egoic self and simply realize the I-ness. Perhaps this has become the teaching. So the understanding of what happened to me gradually became the teaching, and I realize it's not complicated at all. And I realized many humans are ready for it. It was a surprise when I realized that. I first realized it when The Power of Now came out, and without any advertising or anything, more and more people started to read it in the first few months. At first, when the book was finished, I thought a few people may respond to it, and that's fine. If nobody wants to buy it, that's fine too. I said I will go and sell tomatoes to make a living. Why I said that, I don't know. It just came. And then I realized far more people are ready. They actually went into the book and understood it, or realized the truth of it, because they were ready to hear it. It wasn't new, not totally new. They were ready to hear it. Yes. It's always a recognition when you read or listen to true spiritual teaching. Something in you already knew it. It's not totally new. And that is the power of the spiritual teaching, is the presence in you that's already there, recognizes the truth when it sees it. And then you feel it, you respond. Yes. It's always a recognition. It's never somebody telling you something new. You can read other books, you get lots of new facts that you had never heard of and say, wow, that's interesting. Yeah, it may be interesting, but it won't transform you. Only things that you recognize as true actually then bring out that level in you, that dimension in you. And that's the power of a spiritual book. And I didn't realize how many humans actually were ready for that. It's only when they start writing to me, at that time people were still writing letters, writing to me and saying, I bought 5 copies for friends or relatives, and then somebody else said, I bought 3 copies, and there were people say, wow, it's amazing that so many people seem to be ready for it. So that's good. It's happening. It's a relatively simple process. And
theoretically.
Yes. There is still, of course, the old consciousness still has its gravitational pull upon people. But everyone who is here or wherever you are listening to this, seeing this, is part of the transformation and contributes to the awakening. So it is a very significant thing that as you awaken, and most people who join us here, or here in this room or at home, are already undergoing the awakening process. In a few people it comes very suddenly, but that's rare. In most, it happens. It's a gradual awakening, and then it doesn't go like that. It goes more in a spiral. You go, there's presence arises, and then you fall back. And then again it's, and so it gradually goes, it grows slowly with setbacks.
Why do you think it happened like for you?
Well, for some reason it happens for a few people like that, but it seems to be rare. I cannot tell you why that is. It's good not to look for an event. I almost regret telling people how it happened to me later, because it makes people to look for an event. And in a way, what happened, I describe it as something happening. It's not real. It's more of a non-event than an event, because you kind of disappear in that. The form self, the form identity kind of dissolves. So it's more a non-event than an event. It's better not to look for it. It's not for most people. It may come as an occasional glimpses. You have the famous Satori in Zen. Satori is a flash of enlightenment when you suddenly go, wow, yeah. But that doesn't necessarily last. If you have a Satori, it doesn't mean that the next day you're still conscious. But it's a nice thing when it happens. It's a flash of realization. So the Zen master tries to sometimes bring about in you a flash, and that's good. But it's not, of course, it's not the permanent state. That comes gradually. It's an adventure in consciousness, and we can enjoy it while it happens.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, let's ring the bell. You wanted to go on? Yeah. Well, it goes on in you now. Yeah. Oh, it's now. It's already now? Thank you. Thank you. And let's just settle into the present moment. Which is not something perhaps that you would normally do, because there's always something else that's more important or pretends to be more important. And then you forget that the only really important thing in your life is the present moment, because there is nothing else ever. You have to really realize that fully to see the implications of that, and how one could almost say devastating it is to realize that there's only ever this moment. But most people live as if other things, past and future, were more important than this moment. It's an unconscious pattern. So meditation is about becoming present. And the word itself implies, of course, now, present moment. So we sometimes speak of present moment awareness. I sometimes call it presence. And that is what meditation is all about. Discovering that dimension of consciousness in yourself, and usually meditation techniques are designed to get you there. But our meditation is a meditation that does not really have any particular techniques. I'm just inviting you to come into this present moment with your attention directly. Just drop into the now. This is something you can only verify or realize for yourself, that you can actually almost sense, one could say, the presence of the present moment. Although it has no shape or form. So you can become conscious of the present moment itself. What does that mean? First of all, you become more conscious of sensory perceptions. An alertness arises that normally is not there when you are trapped in the continuous stream of thinking. Then that alertness that is synonymous with presence or awareness is just not there. So the normal state of consciousness is to be trapped in this continuous stream of thinking, a lot of it quite useless and repetitive. Thinking can be a powerful thing, but most people's thinking, 99% 9% of it is repetitive, useless, often negative. It's mental noise. And when you're identified with that, when there's that voice in your head that never stops speaking, and you don't even know that you are not that voice, so you think you are the voice, you become the voice, that is a dreamlike state. And you can observe people around you often who are in that dreamlike state. You can see it in their eyes. They're not here. All their attention is absorbed by their thinking. There's just a little bit left, just so they know where they're going and not bump into furniture. But so you can see how many people are, most of the time, not really present, because almost all their attention is absorbed by this continuous noise of thinking. And so they go, and when they look at you, they don't really see you. At best, they see you through the screen of thinking, which is judgments that they may have about you. So there's never a clear perception of anything. Everything is filtered through the thinking, through the judgments of the mind. And that's traditionally in spirituality, that's called being asleep. And that's why the term that is used in various ancient spiritual traditions for enlightenment, or whatever you want to call it, is awakening. So there's an alertness that is suddenly there when you become conscious of the present moment. At first you might notice it as suddenly becoming more aware of your sense perceptions, listening, looking, seeing, hearing. You might also find that alertness is there when something new suddenly arises in your field of vision. Somebody comes into something appears, or in your hearing, a sudden noise, and when a sudden noise appears, or suddenly somebody comes in or comes around the corner, and you suddenly look or listen, and there's an alertness behind the looking and listening. And for those few seconds, when that new thing arises and you give it your full attention, for those few seconds, 3, 4, 5, maybe 2, there's not a thought in your head. Thought then comes in, and after a few seconds, and it may for some people only be a couple of seconds, and then immediately interprets what it is that's there. But there's a moment when something new arises, when there is clear perception and just an alertness in the background. And that's an interesting moment, because that is a natural way of presence arising in you. But usually it's so short-lived that people miss it. So it's a good thing to discover that you actually already meditate for brief moments. You are in the state that we call meditation, and perhaps didn't even know it. And sometimes there may be moments when you just sit somewhere and you suddenly become completely comfortable with that moment as it is. And an inner peace arises, and you feel there's nothing missing here. And this can happen where before your mind said, why am I still waiting here in this waiting room? I've been sitting here for an hour, and why are they keeping me waiting? And so on the mind. And suddenly there may be a shift, and you say, well, I'm here at this moment, I might as well be here fully. And suddenly all that noise of thinking subsides, and you realize, actually, there's nothing really missing in this moment. I'm breathing, looking, listening, feeling alive, and it's fine when the mind is not telling me that it's not fine. And you'll be surprised how often the present moment is fine when you really check it out, whereas the mind would habitually tell you that it's not fine, it's not good enough, something is missing, something shouldn't be there, but of course it is. And when you argue with what is in your mind, that's called unhappiness, in whatever form it comes: irritation, impatience, anger, sadness. Oh, no, not this. So meditation is learning to align yourself internally with the present moment and become aware of the present moment. So first of all, through sensory perceptions. So I just said that sometimes those things arise naturally. You suddenly, either something new comes into your field of vision or your hearing, and an alertness is there for a few seconds, or there may be a moment when you are relaxing into the present moment. And I'm not talking about becoming tired, because that's not where we are going. We're not going towards sleep. We are going towards a heightened sense of alertness, which is what the meditative state is. Or let's do away with the term meditation altogether and just call it presence. There's a heightened state of alertness that is very different from the lowered alertness that when you are moving towards sleep. So that is not meditation. And even when people talk about relaxation, usually or often it's associated in people's minds with kind of you're gradually moving towards sleep. I'm so relaxed now. Or if you go to a hypnotist, you might say, and your eyes are becoming heavier and heavier, and we are not going that way. That's nice, it gives you a little bit of relief from your mind. But here we are exploring the possibility of a higher state of consciousness, heightened alertness. For today's meditation, I'd like to have a little bit more silence. I believe we are ready for that, at least most of you. I'd just like to explain how this works in the context of our technology here. When I'm not speaking, all you do is you look at the screen and you look at the image on the screen.